Respected Dr. Nawaz Khan, Professor of Journalism and Mass Communication in Rajiv Gandhi University, Arunachal Pradesh, and all the esteemed participants. As you know, for this technical session, Professor Nawaz Khan from Rajiv Gandhi University, Arunachal Pradesh will be here to speak something on the concept, this, the media and human rights. Before his deliberation, now may I request Dr. Gage Fukon, Assistant Coordinator of this National Workshop Organizing Committee, to initiate the session and introduce our speaker, sir. Thank you.
A very good afternoon to all and welcome to this 6th day of the workshop. And in this 15th session, our topic of discussion is human rights and role of media. For this session today, we have Dr. Nawaz Khan sir as a resource person, and I on behalf of organizing committee welcome you sir to this session. Before that, I would like to take this privilege to introduce sir to the participants. Dr. Nawaz Khan sir is a professor in Rajiv Gandhi University, Arunachal Pradesh, in the Department of Mass Communication. He's a very accomplished erudite with masters in both arts and science, MA in Mass Communication and English, and MSc in Zoology, along with postgraduate diploma in Journalism and Mass Communication and MPhil, PhD, BEd. His specialization is radio, TV, screen studies, communication research. Sir has published a good number of papers in the journals of national and international, such as History of Radio Broadcasting in Northeast India with special reference to Manipur, Emergence, Growth and Decline of Manipuri Celluloid Feature Films, Media in Conflict Situation in Manipur, Media and Women, a status of women in electronic media in Manipur, History of Press in the Northeast India with special reference to Manipur, etc. So welcome you, sir, to this session. And now this session is yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Gargi, and thank you, Dipen, sir, for these kind words of my introduction. But I have to make some correction here. I have not yet attended the professorship. It is coming. You pray for me also. But actually, I am going to share whatever I have experienced during my journalistic career, where I had seen many incidents of human rights abuses, extreme meetings undertaken by both state actors and non-actors. Then I, being in the academic also, I would like to enrich our fellow colleague participants so that we may be able to revisit all these important issues like human rights and media, particularly mass media, being very pervasive in this society and in this technological digital space is what we need is to understand the relationship between these two. So for this, I think in the next 1 hour, we are going to retouch all those nuances of human rights concept and role of mass media. We are just going in a way where all of us know what is media and what is human rights.
Khan sir, please switch on your mic.
Sir, your voice is not audible. Participants, please wait. There may be some network issues in. Sir, your voice is not audible. There may be some network issues. Please wait for some time. Nawaz sir.
Nawaz sir. Am I audible now?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes, sir. Actually, I have to apologize. I don't want to give the excuse, but unfortunately, one of my near relatives is in hospital, and I have to leave my house earlier. So I took some neighborhood room for this because time schedule is there and I have to meet it. So somehow some technical hitches were there. I'm using someone's computer. I'm sorry to say that, but I think this should not be repeated. There was this electricity problem. Gargi, thank you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
So
You are also
let me
giving your.
come back.
Thank you, sir. You are also giving your.
Yeah, let me come back to the topic. Ours is a kind of revisiting all those concepts which we have been seeing, hearing, even living through our past lives, and now also. And we are just trying to relook at those concepts from a different angle, which will be based on what I felt during my journalistic and as well as academic years. Now, when we say, let me share the one PPT first. Gargi, can you enable my screen sharing?
No, sir.
No, we can do it, sir. We can do it.
No, sir.
No, we can do it, sir. We can do it. On behalf of our organizing committee, request Dr.
No need to share.
On behalf of our organizing committee, request Dr. Dr. Zogesh, the coordinator of the workshop. Dr. Zogesh, the coordinator of the workshop. Request you to make the host.
Yes.
Or
yes.
depend.
Yes.
Can we do without sharing the screen also?
No, you can do it, sir. You can do it. Now I request our Dr. Coordinator. You can do it, sir. You can do it. Now I request
You can share now.
Dr. Coordinator.
Yes. You can share now.
Okay.
You can share now. Yes. Yeah.
Let me
can
try.
share now.
Let me try. Yeah, now I can share. Is it visible? This is the title of the topic.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes, sir. It is
It's
visible.
visible, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes, sir. It is
It's
visible.
visible, sir.
Oh, great, great, great. Uh, actually, what is human rights? We need to revisit it again from different angle, from where different from where we have learned, we have been introduced about it, we have been told about it. Uh, this is a time when human beings seem, at least we think, we have achieved a lot scientifically and knowledge-wise, and wisdom and digitally we can achieve in anything which comes in our reach. So when we talk about human rights, other offsets are also there, like even animal rights and plant rights. And sometimes when, if we go further, in the coming days, we may even talk about, starting talking about abiotic things and non-living things and their rights. Like we have big art movers, dozers, JCBs, they are doing damages to the environment. When we talk about environment, the components are again abiotic and biotic, all we know that. And we are doing harm to the biotic as well as abiotic. So different concepts regarding rights and will maybe emerging as we live years by years. So now, what is human rights? This is the topic we need to revisit. So this is, as we say, human rights are fundamental and inalienable rights and essential for very much respectful, at least respectful living or existence of human beings. And this is naturally given. We see even these human rights, it is not discriminatory, even in the biological truth also. Say we say creed, caste, category, this race, then even gender. So biologically, by nature, we have different gender, but again, rights, even human rights, when we talk about, when we talk about gender right, we still talk about human rights. So even gender, race, caste, and religion and other faith does not have anything to do with giving human rights, because it is naturally ascribed. So values such as dignity and liberty, equality and justice, ethics and morals, all these have significant impact to save human rights. We know, we have been hearing, we have been listening about human rights violations in different grade, in different stages, in different parts of the world, even though it is small, like in the family, or it is big, like on a national level, in the war time, in the war period. So history has shown us the concept of human rights is very ancient. It is as old as human civilization, we should say. It is recognized and accepted as necessary component for the well-being of human civilization at various stages of the history. Uh, different type of governance has been evolved throughout the history, but in each and every type of stage in evo, human right violation, human right uh, issue has been there. Say if we go back in history, it can be traced back to thousands of years, from the Vedas and and in the Europe, this Magna Carta is there. Then the French Declaration of Human Rights, than American Bill of Rights in the newer versions. So human rights, as we know what is human right and what are the components, better leave aside that. Then we go about how human rights are protected and how human rights are violated. So the dimensions of human rights should be demarcated well so that we may know how much is infringed, how much is violated. But again, the power that be, whether state actor or non-state actor, mostly those who are armed and powerful, they may have their own interpretation of what is human right. And those who suffered or those who endures, those who are governed, may have their own interpretation of life. But there are very much agreed contours of human rights. So that is why these instruments like French Declaration of Human Rights and ancient Bill of American Bill of Rights, these are evolved. So we have Human Rights Commission in the national level as well as in state level also. So all these are offset from how human rights are demarcated, how human rights are defined, are interpreted. So when interpretation of human rights are agreed upon, still those who are in power may do extreme things, violate the human rights of those who are at the receiving end. So we need to know what are the contours of human right. And it may differ from race to race, from place to place, from regime to regime. And now, since politics is there, it is related with administration and governance. Exploitation is always there. So human rights violation may vary from its own form and elements behind it kind of violation. Some forms of human violation include, say, slavery. We have been hearing about slavery all throughout the history. And poverty is there, then physical exploitation, forced labor, and child labor is one of the human rights violations that is to be addressed. So abuses of power by the power that be mostly the political leaders, the rich ones, and the state authorities. These are done through using their own policies which violate the basic rights, basic human rights of those who are governed and who are devastated with the effect on their human rights. So many examples are there where authoritarian regimes may do violations through many policies of theirs to their subjects. So this is to be reread and redefine. Then we will be able to put more elements, more components in our definition of interpretation of human rights. So when we know about what is human rights and what are the elements to be put in that contour, then we would be able to know how to protect human rights. So we need to know what are human rights only to be able to protect those rights. So without knowing the human rights properly, we won't be able to protect them. So for making policies or for making concerted effort for safeguarding the human rights, what we need to understand is from academic side, being academicians, we need to propose, we need to interpret, and we need to include all those aspects which we feel with firm ground that these constitute human rights. See, that will be able to help in informing human rights protection policies. So this is a kind of effort, and this effort should be a concerted one, and that will be where that is the area where being academians we will be able to contribute. And for that we need to understand these concepts. So effects of protection of efforts of human right protection have been made in various ways in different levels: international level, national level, state, regional level also, and even organizations are there which are using the title human rights protection kind of thing, Human Rights Watch. So groups are there. So this is on international level where different countries come together and form some mechanism through which human rights can be protected. So United Nations can be counted as one of the leading torch. And through internal mechanism also by the state institutions, they also have mechanism for human right protections. That is how the government itself constitute national, state level, national as well as state level human right commissions. So civil society institutions are also involved in this endeavor of protection of human rights. So international protection of human rights is done through international human rights instruments. Conventions are there, declarations are there, protocols are there, obligations, and like, and then global society, civil society, because ultimately the subjects, the governed ones, the human beings are the ones who will be having more stake in human right violation or human right protection for that matter. So in that situation, the global civil society should make effort, and in that endeavor, being academicians, we need to lend our contributions. So since we need to know what are the human rights mechanism, protection mechanism, then we need to know that more declarations, more bills which are formulated for the protection of human rights in different parts of the world on global context. So Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Human rights is universal, and all the humankind on this earth should be coming together with solidarity so that these human rights can be protected. So in that way, this universality of the human rights should be should have some declaration and forceful declaration how to protect it and how not to violate and how to counter human right violations. So Universal Declaration was to be made. So how it was made, we better relook again here. So protecting human right is one of the core purposes of the United Nations. As I said, soon after the World War II, United Nations started this process, coming together on the table and talking about human rights violations during those wars, First War as well as the Second War. So Second World War. So the United Nations Charter adopted in 1945 was the first human right document to recognize the protection and promotion of human rights. Here, Universal Declaration of Human Rights was done as an United Nations Charter, and it adopted in 1945. And as I said, American Civil Right Bill were there, Magna Carta was there, and other concepts which were not in the form of bill, law, or any kind of instrument, but some edicts were there in before also regarding human rights. But during those time, most of the governance were in the system of monarchy system, principality system. These were not in the interest of the subjects. So now when democracy came into being, then people, the demography or the people, they started asserting their rights. So this is how UN Charter was adopted in 1945, and this was the first step in which both protection and promotion of human rights was become an obligation to be carried out by individuals as well as collective state. So the government as well as civilians also have the right to protect, the duty to protect. So the declaration, UN Declaration Charter says all the human beings need, and as well as the state powers, the institutions need to protect human rights in a collective way. So after the subsequent adoption of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, let me come back to this. It's not working. Is it visible? My screen is visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is visible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, great.
It is visible.
It's not moving. Let me share it. Oh, it's coming. So human right this was declared in 1945. The resolution was adopted in 1945, but the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was done in 1948. So human rights have been expanded further by acknowledging the group rights such as right to development, right to clean environment, right to food, and right to even peace, etc. So see, we have in India this food for all kind of thing. This is about human rights again. So Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 have been expanded further. It has included right to clean environment, right to food also. So every year, the 10th December, December is observed as International Human Rights Day uh, to bring the attention of the people of the world that Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the common standard of achievement for all people and all nations to protect human rights. So December 10 is one day when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is remembered, and the need for human rights in life is emphasized. And here again, we can say human rights and Indian Constitution. India, as we know, is bound with the Constitution and become a democratic republic. So human rights, Indians, human right violation has been there all over the world from in different eras, in different times. But again, Indians of those days, during the colonial days, suffered most human right violations in the hands of the colonizers, the British. So soon after their leaving, when India got independence, our forefathers started thinking mostly about human rights. So obviously, those people who just emerged from the yoke of colonial yoke would think of human rights, protection of human rights. It is obvious. So the Indian Constitution, which was formulated after India got independence, have some provisions for protection of human rights. So what are those? Let's just go back to that. So Indian Constitution also recognizes the worth of human rights, and in its preamble and in the Indian Constitution incorporates both civil and political rights as fundamental rights. And this is there in chapter 3, and economic, social, and political rights as directive principles of state policy in chapter 4. So fundamental rights are
Dr. Nawaz Ahmed answering. Dr. Nawaz Ahmed answering. Dr. Nawaz Ahmed. Your speaker is on. Your speaker is on. Please mute it. Please mute it.
Gargi, can I continue?
Sir, please continue.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, please continue. Sir, please continue. Yes, sir, please
Okay.
continue.
Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's very difficult from here. So we come back to the human rights and Indian Constitution. So I think most of us might have read Indian Constitution, but a few of us might have given thought about the provisions of human rights in its preamble itself, and because it is in a different nomenclature in like fundamental rights. So here, when we talk about social group right, social right, political right, it's all about human right. All are related. So Indian Constitution is a rich, very, very rich with the provision of human right protection, because it is well defined there. And as I said, fundamental rights are justiciable with constitutional remedy in section, it is provided in Article 32. So if we go back to the Indian Constitution once, we will be able to again know it well. So the Constitution of India under its section 2(1)(d), it will be when you hear my saying these numbers, it will be jarring. But I'm just quoting all these things so that you may go back and reread again. Let's give some time to read these parts when human rights are there, violations are there, and we as responsible citizens need to contribute at least with good, suitable, not suitable, with the adequate interpretation of a human right, and giving a contour where demarcation between violation and protection is there. So I'm just quoting all these things. And right to life is guaranteed in chapter 4. fundamental rights are justiciable, as I said. And then in the Constitution of India, in its sections 2(1)(d) of the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993 is there. Protection of Human Rights Act 1993, right to life is also guaranteed there, and right to life is again guaranteed in the Article 21. It should be read with Article 14, 25, 27, and 28 of the Constitution of India. So these are guaranteed as fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution. That is why Indian Constitution is very rich, but still scope is there for good interpretation, for rightful interpretation. Again, when conflict is there in the case of interpretation of human rights violation and protection, we have our Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of India. So it intervenes. So Supreme Court of India also declared that a man has not only a right to live, not only a right to live, I repeat, but to live with human dignity. So right to life is human right, fundamental right, but not simply living, but instead of simply living, it should be living with dignity. So any person who is born have right to live, and that too with a dignity. So Supreme Court emphasized on this. Then consequently, all attributes for living for a life with dignity of a human soul is incorporated. Then what are the important things which contribute to a human being living with dignity? These include education. Again, before that, we have roti, kapra, or makan. Very popular glitch. We need shelter, we need food, and we need clothing. We need, beyond that also, we need education. So these are guaranteed, and all welfare activities of the state. I'm talking about India, like country India. State must be directed to ensure socio-economic condition where no one in the country is deprived of basic requirements to lead a dignified life. So Constitution has given the provisions for the protection and promotion of human rights. It is again consolidated by the verdict of Supreme Court of India, which says the state authority is responsible for providing all those basic needs which are required for a person living with dignity. So as I said, many things are involved, and it's all about interpretation. So all those who are at the helms of affairs may interpret this will be related to human rights, that will be related to human rights. Then they make provisions and they implement it. That is how we, the people of India, protect ourselves from human right violation and to live together with dignity. So Supreme Court, Indian Constitution, all these are promoting, protecting a citizen of India to live a dignified life. So the concept of the National Human Rights Commissions, that has come back because Indian Constitution says fundamental rights, human rights are mentioned in fundamental rights, and Supreme Court also says it is important. And why it is important, it is said. So then after that, the government, the authority, the authority instituted National Human Rights Commissions. So National Human Rights Commission in India, it was set up in 1993. As I said, in 1993, the National Human Rights Commission was the National Human Rights Act, Protection of Human Rights Act 1993 was passed. Then, because of that, only National Human Rights Commission was set up in that year. Then, what was the objective? To ensure better protection of human rights in the country. In India, human rights are protected through this Protection of Human Rights Act 1993, which has instruments like National Human Rights Commission, State Human Rights Commissions. So National Human Rights Commission is a mechanism through which human rights protection and promotion can be achieved. So the objective is to protect human rights in the country. So being mandated to inquire into complaints of violation of human rights or negligence, for that matter, into complaints of violations of human rights and this prevention of such violation of human rights by the government, by the authority, or by state actors. So this is very important step in the growth of human right movement. So human right movement started, in one way we can say, with our struggle for freedom. So the struggle for freedom was based on human rights. The movement, the non-violence movement of Mahatma Gandhi, based in one way on demand for protection of human rights. So that rolled over into Indian Constitution. Then Supreme Court emphasized on it, reconsolidated it. Then in 1993, National Human Rights Commission was formed after the inaction of the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. So here the politicians, the government servants, and the state actors are made accountable for prevention or for protection of human right violation in India. So the Human Rights Commission, National Human Rights Commission, can inquire into any complaint of violation of human rights or negligence in the prevention of such violations. And for this, they can take up suo motu cases also. So the commission is tasked to promote awareness also and spread human right literacy among the various sections of society. So leave alone to create awareness about human rights literacy in the big populace of India, countries like India. I'm talking about myself. I myself seldom visit this concept, human rights. From on and off, I used to mention about human rights, but I don't seriously go back to human rights violation kind of thing. Need to do this, what need to be done. Little thinking I did, despite the fact that I have watched a lot of human rights violations in during my journalistic career. That means it seems we Indians have very short memory. So once we have seen this human rights violation happen, then after some times, by naturally we forget. But being academician, we need to uh, think about it and give suggestions and be always wakeful. Only then we will be able to cooperate. We will be able to cooperate with National Human Rights Commission kind of mechanism through which we can contribute our suggestions and make media this human rights literacy reach out to the uh, large section of the society. That will help to promote and protect human rights in the long run in the country. So it is also required, the Human Rights Commission is also required to review the efficacy of the safeguards, the mechanisms provided in various laws of the protection of human rights. The commission is formed only not to be there for creating awareness among the populace, but to also look into the human right protection laws mechanism, whether they are powerful or not, whether they are exploitative or not, whether they are only for namesake or not. So they are supposed to examine conditions in even in jail also, in orphanage also, in hospital also, and uh, encourage the efforts of other civil society organizations like NGOs and other organizations, other forums engaged in human right related issues. This is how human right uh, can be protected, and the promotion and protection of human rights can be achieved in this country. So that is how National Human Rights Commission was formed. And now let's see, being in Northeast, uh, I want to take you down to the memory lane about Northeast. There was a one time in Northeast where insurgency was at the peak. And now we cannot say it is all over, uprooted, but we are seeing a very comparatively peaceful time here. So uh, when insurgency is there, ethnic classes are there in the region, we can only think that there could be extremes from different sides regarding human rights. So human rights situation in Northeast India. So it is more vulnerable to violation of human rights. Ethnic conflicts are there because insurgency was based mostly on ethnic line. So mostly in different states, these seven sister states, where different groups with different languages, with different faith, they inhabit. That is why small compartments are formed in this area, and that is again make more worse by the armed uprising, whether it is Assam, whether it is Mizoram, or it is Manipur, and leave alone Nagaland, where all these started. Uh, so Northeast India, as we know, comprises this Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, Tripura. So which one is more peaceful? Sikkim is the one, and like that, others are burning in one or other issues, ethnic conflict or insurgency movement. So the region is an area of special significance because it borders to the region borders to other countries also, like China, Burma, Pakistan, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. So in considering all these ethnic conflict, insurgency, bordering, within other countries. So this this makes a good ground for human right violation. And army is deployed here, and number of security personnel forces are very large, and they render this region really a field for human right violation. So over the many decades, there have been reports that violation of human rights in the form of army excesses, then barbaric killings, and kidnapping for ransom, extortion, and even rape, beside that drug abuse, child abuse, various forms of human rights violation were heard in this region. So then we see this insurgency and counterinsurgency. What is the conflict? Here we talk about the state uh, and non-state actors. So when insurgency is there, obviously counterinsurgency by the authority, by the government will be there. So all measures will be there. So these measures in Northeast India started in the mid 1950s, or even before that, because the struggle for secession in this part started in the 40s. So just to tackle this armed Naga struggle, which was continuing in the middle of the 1950s, these counterinsurgency measures were taken up. And the trouble spread from Assam to Assam, from Nagaland to Assam, Mizoram, and even Manipur, then even Tripura, where more troops, Indian troops were rushed to protect the region. Then you can imagine what are the methods employed, and because to control the situation, and what price the people of this region had to pay. So the response of the central government through the deployment of army and other paramilitary forces to deal with the insurgency with a heavy hand militarily, uh, could not address the situation. As I said, factions are still there which are not coming to the table to talk out and to come to an agreed point where to leave insurgency. So many are there, some are talking, some are still not agreeing to talks with the Indian government to come to a solution to resolve the conflict situation. So maybe there are many reasons for the government to uh, deal with this insurgency in a military way. But one thing is clear, that addressing this issue, conflict issue, with a heavy hand using military is not able to achieve the required resolution, because it is not addressing the underlying causes and conditions caused through harassment of the public, general public. So when insurgency was there and counterinsurgency started, one in the middle of the 1950s, that decade, the most enduring act is notorious and sometimes termed as draconian or dark law, is the Armed Forces Special Power Act. So this Armed Forces Special Power Act, so in addition to all those existence of several violent insurgent groups, The government's imposition of this Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958 make the soldiers, the army, to commit more violations and that too with effective immunity from persecution, from accountability. So that certainly worsened the plight of the citizens of this region, where Armed Forces Special Power Acts 1958 have been there. The rights of the citizens are violated mostly by the armed state actors, because under this act they are protected from questioning. They have effective immunity for whatever they do in the name of counterinsurgency. So every other family in the region has a story to tell, a sorrow story, a sad story to tell. In the last few decades, we had seen it. And the underground outfit, on the other hand, many of the groups, they also are responsible for atrocities, including enforced disappearances, harassment, and this ethnic cleansing, insurgency on ethnic lines. So the civilians who were one-to-one in a brotherly manner comes in to arm group, and they hijacked it. So apart from the extrajudicial killing by state actors, non-state actors, they have no judicial system. They have no judicial system like this democratic one. They have their kangaroo courts. So here we have this Afaspa story, Armed Forces Special Power Act, demanding of removal of this act continued, mostly in Manipur. I'm talking about Manipur. And here we see the photograph of this lady called, titled as, popularly known as Iron Lady. So Iron Lady Rom Sarmila Chanu. So she demanded the repeal of this draconian, so-called draconian Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1958, and that she did it for 16 years, fasting, fast to unto date. She did fast unto date agitation for 16 years, demanding the repeal of the revocation of Armed Forces Special Power Act 1958 from Manipur. However, the government failed to review or repeal this act, and it is in place there still. So the government's contention was that it is necessary to empower the military or the armed forces with special powers, because they are dealing with those who are armed combatants. So combat insurgency is to be countered with military, and that armed military should be given special powers to curb the insurgency movement. So that is the stand of the government. So from the angle of the rights of criminals or anti-national elements, so human right violation is viewed as something offensive in relation to conflict situations, such as terrorism and insurgency. But the extra power given in the 1958 Act, if it is being misused, by the armed forces, it will cause much harm to the civilians. And the claim is that much harm has been done using this act by the military in this region. Even the state human rights commissions in Assam as well as in Manipur, they have no jurisdiction in regard to this act, in this regard of violation of human rights by the armed forces, by the members of the armed forces. So those cases in which armed forces or army are involved, the state human rights commission cannot entertain such cases also. They cannot question, because the armed forces, they enjoy the special powers which protect with impunity from prosecution. So now we know the situations here in insurgent hit region, and how human rights have been violated in the last 3-4 decades. Now let's see what media did and what media could have done and what media should do. So these are some visuals of what had happened in Manipur's context. It is related with army, state actor. Then see here, media. So now, what is the function of media as we know? So before coming to the concept of media, I want to go to the concept of mass communication. All we know, understand this concept, but if we go back once, we will be able to review it from a different angle, from one perspective. So mass communication, as we know, it is the communication to the large section of the people who are geographically isolated, using some kind of media, some kind of interface. So earlier in traditional media, what we had was radio, television, newspaper, magazines, apart from books. So all these constitute mass communication media. So mass communication is done for what? For disseminating information, for sharing information, for making more educated, more informed, and for entertainment. So in mass communication, mass communication has different areas, and those different areas have their own responsibilities. But most of those mass media which have their more responsibility include those who do news reporting, journalism. So mass communication part, that type of mass communication news media, any kind of media which can be reached to large section of the society, of the people, geographically isolated, geographically living in different areas simultaneously. So in that way, where mass communication is using media. So media can be of different types again. So those media which use journalism as its production have more responsibility. Apart from this journalism, advertising and public relation is also related to mass communication. But advertising, as I said, is again having responsibility, but not like those news media, which adopts journalism as its component. So, almost everyone get his or her information about the world, national or local or any kind of region and their affairs from mass media. So what are the mass media? We know that, and now as it is mass media and social media, the line is very thin and very blurred. So print media, broadcast journalism, when we say print media, this is radio, this is newspaper, magazine, and when we say broadcast media, the radio and television. So these media, when adopt this journalism, print media, this is press.
Khan sir.
And television and radio.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yes, sir.
Because
yes.
Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, sir.
It's all about
Because you see,
125.
it's all about 125.
Oh,
Try to sum up.
5 minutes.
Sum up?
5 minutes.
Yes, yes, yes. Then we have to take what is
Okay.
verbal attendance, all these
Yes,
things
sir,
have to
yes,
complete.
yes. Then
Okay.
we have to take what is verbal attendance, all these things have to complete.
Okay, okay, sir. So let me come back to this human rights violations, media rights and human rights board. Let me jump to this. This is one very haunting visual. So when you Google, you will be able to see this. Here, what I need to emphasize is about media literacy. Media reports the human rights violations, but when media doesn't report, it becomes something like gaudy media kind of thing. Nowadays we have been seeing it. Many news channels or newspapers, they may be sided with the power that be, and they report about those who are powerful only and sidelining those who are less powerful or have no power. So in that way, media persons need to be literate about human rights violations. So we need to, as academicians, we need to formulate policies through relooking into what are the areas where media can play a good role for the protection and promotion of human rights. So for that, we need to we need to mold, we need to empower journalists, media persons, those who are in the field, those who are people who really do the gatekeeping kind of thing in the mass media. They need to think over it and what kind of accountability they have, what kind of responsibility they need to shoulder. And then what they need is media literacy again. So when we say media literacy, general people, the general public should be able to decide whether one news item is suitable or not, whether it is fake or not. Like that, media persons should have media literacy about human right violations, and only then they will be able to do justice with the profession. So what are the functions of media? We need to say it again. So media have a role in protecting and promoting human rights in every kind of governance. But again, in democracy, like in India, media need to be very much independent, very much private, not government controlled. Only then government can be questioned When government or that power that be, those who are in the power are not questioned, then civil who will protect the mm, rights of the civilians. So this is South African photojournalist, and he was Pulitzer Prize winner, and he photographed this uh, child in the Sudan famine in 1993. One vulture is looking, so he died by suicide at the age of 33, 1944, no, 1994. So what are the regions? So this is a kind of accountability, famine, right to food, human rights. So he was only clicking, only photographing the child and a vulture. This the vulture is waiting the child to die so that it may pounce upon this flesh. So now he realized after not intervening, because he was only shooting, like nowadays people are shooting with their any incident with their mobile phone, they are shooting, but doing little to intervene to save the situation. So he also could not do anything, only to shoot this photograph, and he got Pulitzer Prize. So realizing all those his mistakes, probably he died by suicide, very sad, at the age of 33. So uh, he like he might have realized, this is only my surmise. So all media persons should be aware about human rights, because they are in the field with responsibility. So if they are there with responsibility, the movement for human right protection will go a long way in at least in democratic countries like India. So with this, I thank all of you for their patience listening. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir.